Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So we're coming up on Trump's first 100 days. Yes, this is an arbitrary number, but it seems to be an arbitrary number that everyone else is talking about. So I'm also going to talk about it. Now, Trump ran a ghastly campaign, if we're being honest. Now, but that notwithstanding, I did have hopes. I for the most part, understood what was going to take place with him in that particular administration. But again, what I'm believing is going to take place is different than what I'm hoping may take place. I looked at it as Trump's a plutocrat, but I looked at it as he's not their plutocrat, if that makes sense. He's not an establishment plutocrat. He's something a little bit different. I thought that maybe, just by virtue of that difference, and by virtue of him wanting popularity, that he would dominate that office by, yes, doing extraordinarily right-wing stuff, giving his cronies a huge amount of money back in tax breaks and policy changes. But I thought he may also slide a little bit to the left. I mean, because ultimately, if you slide a little bit to the left, you, for the most part, will be able to pull people from both sides. And you would get a certain amount of credibility that you probably still don't deserve. So when he's running through the campaign and he's saying stuff like $10 minimum wage, that's mind-blowing for a Republican to talk about a minimum wage increase. Everybody's going to have health care. No more just regular foreign intervention or toppling governments. It was one thing after the other. Hands off Social Security and Medicare. These things were pretty clear. He did not hedge on them. He just said those things. Now, if you're looking at that and he's doing that in the Republican Party, your thought is, maybe he'll try to do it. That's not what took place, of course. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people didn't hear those things. And people hoped, at least his base, I would imagine, hoped that he would pursue those ends. I mean, if you're going to say you're going to drain the swamp and then you add a bunch of people from Goldman Sachs, that's not draining the swamp. Now, among his accomplishments, there are two. One, he was able to get Neil Gorsuch into that particular seat in the Supreme Court. That's an accomplishment. I don't particularly like that accomplishment, but that was an accomplishment. Democrats put up a weak resistance. They were rolled over, stripped of the filibuster, and Trump got his guy in office. The second one, and the one that I find to be far more substantial, he put a bullet in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a big deal, and he should get a lot of credit for this one. It's an amazing thing. They were passing a trade deal that would have allowed corporations to sue the United States government in a foreign court. They were literally trying to undermine the laws of this nation if those laws or regulations or policies adversely affected multinational corporations' profit. That is an amazing thing. That is making the U.S. government subordinate to some foreign tribunal. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. The policies were so ghastly, meaning it was going to attack people, workers, environmental regulations across the board. It was so ghastly that one of the provisions, at least based on what the Prime Minister of Australia mentioned, saying that they weren't supposed to talk about it, even acknowledge it, until 4 years after it was signed, meaning they wanted that to be in effect for 4 years before they even revealed to the public that that particular plan was in place. It is an amazing thing. Trump putting a bullet in it was a good thing. It was a damn good thing. But we also have to look at the many failures. The many absolute failures. And everything from, look, I would call trying to give massive tax cuts a failure, but I know some people may not. Trump care was ridiculous. Trump care was absolutely ridiculous. You have a party who hates and abhors health care. Not only do you cover less people, but you still keep, for the most part, the core structure of that particular healthcare that they hated with a passion. So, A, it doesn't do what you need it to do, which is insure people for healthcare. And B, you still have the Republican Party voting for healthcare. Yeah, that's failure. That's failure. The Muslim ban was ridiculous. And again, another failure. Like, policy after policy. So, but I'm going to post the Guardian's article, but I want to go a little bit further than that because I think there's something more interesting here. When I was writing this up and I was thinking about this segment, I hit upon an abnormality or an anomaly that's interesting. And I realized it supports my other arguments on why people vote in the Republican Party. I think I've done it for both parties, but specifically in this case, where does Trump's support comes from? How does he keep that support? Even in the face of all of these things that's going against what he said, how does he maintain that support? Now, yes, he's one of the most unpopular presidents in history at this point, but so are the parties. So are the parties. His popularity is over the parties. So we need to put that in perspective in regards to saying how unpopular he is. He has a core support of base. Now, I make the case, this boils down to four main reasons. The first one is cultural relativity. And what I mean is, there are four culprits that allow him to maintain that power base. That's what I'm trying to get at. Even for the most part, allowing the Republican Party to exist in the first place. You must understand, when you're talking to people, and you're talking to people about Republican policy, those people tend to be aghast at those policies. And yet, these guys continuously go into office, up to this point of having control of all levels of government, and the overwhelming majority of the levels of government in the states. There has to be a reason that this works in this way. Four reasons, four culprits. The first, cultural relativity. Cultural relativity. So you have a situation where one demographic subordinates another demographic, subjugates them, contorts a man and a woman into a slave. Now, in this very specific situation, you create this aspects of society that's based off identity, where really the thing that you probably should have gotten at is class. Meaning, you can have this strange and weird situation where a white man with no money in his pocket, dirt poor, completely uneducated, will assert his superiority based on the color of his skin and nothing else. It's an amazing thing. It's kind of ridiculous. But the point I'm getting at is, if that particular guy and his offspring, just from a cultural standpoint, those people will understand when they realize the wages aren't going up. Their life isn't getting easier. And as they look across, they see things like the civil rights movement and all these other things of people pushing for equal and civil rights. From a relative perspective, from a culturally relative perspective, you can get the sense that those people, for the most part, those others who are doing a little bit better, even though we were higher up on a totem pole, well, those people are trying to rise up on that totem pole also. That makes me uncomfortable. That's a loss of my position in this particular society. Whether that's done on a completely conscious level or not is besides the point. In practice, it operates in those terms. You end up with a schism in your society based off of things like race. That's a crazy schism. The overwhelming majority of the things that come up should be based in class, not race. In our case, reality seems to have a bias towards equality or balance. It seems to have a bias towards balance. Meaning that even though you have a situation of the civil rights movement doing the right thing and trying to pull equal rights for blacks, just by virtue of that movement, you're going to get something that pushes back against that movement. The legitimacy of the movement or not is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The positive or the negative of the movement, of the action in that particular society is, again, irrelevant. All those things are equal. All those movements are equal. It's almost like saying a sunny day has no more fundamental right to exist than a hurricane. The event itself is just the event itself. The consciousness that's involved in that particular appraisal gives it a good or bad. But that has nothing to do with the fundamental value of the event. The event is just what it is. I'm making this point of, yes, Democrats pushing for equal rights was a good thing. It was positive. The pushback to that, or the counter to that, yes, I would say that wasn't necessarily positive. Because understand what took place. All those whites who were in the Democratic Party who hated what Democrats did jumped into the Republican Party. I don't think all Republicans are racist and hateful, but certainly there is a demographic. And the point I'm getting at is that demographic, when looking out at the world, particularly if they're looking from a cultural lens, can see themselves diminished or diminishing. Now, that diminishing is not lesser than. The whole point of the diminishing is to be equal to. But if you are greater than and you're being brought down to equal to, would that particular person, would that individual see that as being lesser than, just based on relative perspective or relative distance? I want to say yes. I want to say yes. This is various degrees of overtness on how much people are aware of that particular behavior, but I do believe that that is a particular behavior that people indulge in. The second part that kind of feeds into this is othering. It's othering, and it's something that Donald Trump does extremely well. Republicans have done it forever. Donald Trump has ripped the mask off, and it's no longer this thing of code words or buzzwords. It's, I am going to be blunt and overt, and you're going to be very clear on who I'm saying the culprit and the enemy is. In a nutshell, Muslims, they're trying to murder you. Mexicans, immigrants, they're trying to take your jobs. Africans Americans, they're trying to take your money. They want your cup of coffee. All of these people are against you. You're just good capitalist folk. And you go out there and you try to earn a living. And everybody else, your difficulties are not your own. You've done everything that you're supposed to do. The problem is those others. Those states, those countries, those people, they're out to get you. And they've been pressing their boot on your throat, which is why your life has gotten harder. Now, as you can tell, this is pretty self-serving. You're awesome. The problem is everybody else. And it negates any level of introspection at all, particularly if you just take that argument at face value because of your own reality box, your own bias, or your own want to have your ego assuaged by thinking that you're just fucking awesome. This is, and understand, Democrats do this too. The whole Russia narrative after the election, where they're screaming Russia at the top of their lungs because they don't want to have this honest conversation of why she lost to reality show hosts. Both parties do it. They may do it in different ways. In this particular case, it's this seductive argument of your ills are not your own. Your ills are a result of somebody else. And if we put those other people in line, your reality will be perfectly okay. Not only is this immensely self-serving, but the argument perpetuates itself. Meaning the more difficult that particular society is, the more useful the party can exploit that particular argument. Meaning your life is difficult. Well, your life is difficult not because you did anything wrong, but because of them. Now, the policies that are being implemented, the regulations that are being implemented, the tax cuts, the things of reductions in services. Well, yeah, that's making their life harder. But that guy will still continuously use the same argument of, we're trying to help you. We're trying to help you. We want you to be free. We want you to be unfeathered. And these others are a boot on your throat. Now, there's a weird part to this. So yes, it's self-serving. Yes, for the most part, that allows a party to stay in power for the 1%. But it's also slightly from a shallow view of reality. You can make a case. The case is illegitimate, but you can make a case, again, from a shallow appraisal of reality. So what I'm getting at is, the issue in our society is not race, it's class. Race is used as a way of obfuscating the point that the issue is class by playing into people's reality, their biases, their fears, their cultural identity in many respects. If you're looking through a shallow appraisal of a cultural lens, and you see many of the demographics, every other demographic line up in the other party, with whites lining up in the Republican Party, your own biases can make you feel politically alienated from that other party. It can make you feel politically alienated. Meaning, as you look out, you can't define yourself into the other party because that other party is full of people who don't look like you. And you've grown up in this cultural quagmire of sorts of seeing through a very particular lens. That lens doesn't lend itself to the other party. The last part, number 4, has to do with political expedience or political exploitation. So they would say, and again, if you've noticed, all of these things interrelate with one another in the way they function. Like it's not completely separate and distinct from the others. It's an interplay, all based on the perceptions of the people involved in that particular reality. In this particular case, the Republican Party would say, hey, you see they have all those others in that other party. You see all those others. When they line up to vote, 90% of blacks vote Democrat. You have a huge majority of Hispanics who vote Democrat. Asians, Democrat. LGBT, Democrat. We're here for you. That party is there for them, for the other. Now, in making that case, you turn around and you say, the Democrats are trying to lower your taxes because they want to give those people social services. Has nothing to do with you. They want to give those people your money. They're trying to take your cup of coffee and give to them. Now, the Democrats are going to do that because those people vote for Democrat. Meaning, they're making this case that says the reason why that they want to raise your taxes is not because healthcare, education, not because of services that would benefit the entirety of society. No, they're doing that because they want to give that money to those others. This is the argument that Republicans use. The problem with this argument is that it has no basis in reality at all. Ultimately, whites utilize social services and welfares far more than any other demographic. The argument, again, I make the point, is self-serving. It allows somebody to feel good about themselves while pointing the finger at somebody else is part of the problem. Now, the problem with this is they're hurting themselves. They're hurting themselves, not to mention the rest of the country, by taking certain positions that's not based in the welfare of everybody. It's not even based on their own welfare. It's purely cultural. It's purely cultural. So, yes, there are 4 culprits that I would say, or at the very least 4 general culprits, each playing into each other and each kind of prodding somebody along to vote for a particular party. The last part to this is, it's not even acknowledged, but it's interesting in the sense that it is a major contradiction. When Donald Trump ran, Donald Trump didn't push for right-wing policies. He didn't push for right-wing policies per se. Yes, tax cuts and everything else. But for the longest time, we've been led to believe that the reason why people voted Republican is because they wanted to have their Medicare taken away. They wanted to have their Social Security taken away. They wanted to give massive tax cuts to the rich. Those are supposed to be these Republican ideas that people wanted. Then how did Trump get elected? I'm making this point of, if they're voting for Donald Trump that enthusiastically, and Donald Trump is running to the left of the Republican Party, how do they square that circle? Like, how do you say that, yes, these people were voting for this stuff because they full well understood the Republican Party was catering to the rich? They knew they were going to give massive tax cuts. They knew they were going to cut services. They knew they were going to be foreign interventionists. Then another candidate comes in, runs in the Republican primaries, is against military intervention, is against getting rid of Social Security and Medicare, is for industrial spending or in home soil. Those things are different. Which means that if they voted for a Republican Party, they're voting not because of those particular policies. There has to be something else. The something else that I'm making the case has nothing to do with economics at all. It has everything to do with this cultural perspective that these guys are functioning under. And look, don't misunderstand me. Democrats also function under that to a particular degree, but they function under it in a different way. In this particular case, I'm talking about Trump and his supporters. They would even, because understand, they'd even go so far as to take the tongue of the capitalist and make his arguments for him. That's an amazing thing. But when Donald Trump comes in, those same people, for the most part, took on Trump's arguments and parroted those things. What is the common factor in those two things? I'm making this argument that the reason they're voting for Republicans, the reason why they go and pull the lever for Paul Ryan or one of those other guys, has nothing to do with their policies. They're making that vote in spite of their policies. Trump, for the most part, is a more honest version of the Republican. That's what I'm getting at. Even at a core level, whether it's overt, meaning in the way they're thinking about it or not, there is a cultural relevance to the way Trump behaves. That cultural relevance gains him a certain degree of support. And they can leverage this stuff in order to pull votes. In order to exceed that, you have to get out this model. Like, you have to create a situation where you have to get out of the situation where you're stuck fighting identity battles. Because if we're being honest, the battle is not identity. The battle is class. The whole thing with identity in the first place is for capitalist extremists to essentially make this case of creating a division in society, allowing them to not get anything done. The parties run interference for that capitalistic class. So you have a party system that doesn't want to talk about the actual issues that govern our society. So socioeconomics is off the table, or at the very least, any socioeconomic argument that is not based in some kind of oligarchical rule is off the table. Same thing with ideas of war and warfare, off the table. Those things are cash cows. So the parties themselves don't bring it up and run interference for anybody who tries to essentially bring that up. Instead, you get the ridiculousness of trivialities, things that don't really mean anything. Yes, they're important within their own right. But if we're talking about the entire model to which we operate, certainly anything else will pale in comparison to that. We're talking about this a revolution of reality to the degree that we see our world around us. That's what we're talking about trying to affect. And that's the thing I'm saying, that the parties are there to prevent anybody from getting close to touching. One of the tools that they use to do that is playing up these arguments of identity. If you're attacking my identity, there's no reason I'm ever going to vote for you. Now, politically, yeah, that's great. You're able to harness a certain group of people just based on a political trap of them feeling like they have to vote for one or the other to either protect their identity. No, actually in both cases, from the relative perspective of the individuals in both parties, they're looking at it as if they're trying to protect their identity. You need something else to overcome that. You can overcome it in two ways. An independent party that doesn't play by those rules at all, that literally just absolves from that particular gamesmanship. Or you can do that within a party, but you have to show a disparity, enough of a disparity that makes their self-interest with regards to identity, those illusions, those fantasies, matter less than their own self-interest in regards to economics. The Democratic Party can't show enough of the disparity between those two to overcome that hurdle. If you had a candidate who could, they would overcome that particular hurdle. You can get those people on your side, but those people have to full well understand that at the very least their economics, they will be better off. They will be better off. Otherwise, this hallucination will persist, and you will continuously have people essentially voting against their own self-interest, parroting the arguments of the people who are against their self-interest, and essentially creating political divisions through a particular society, not because of substantive issues, but because of minutiae that they put out as substantive issues to obfuscate for the actual issues, if that makes sense. Trump had an opportunity to do something different, and he just didn't do it. I would make the case that he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. At least up until what I thought he was going to do. Let me be specific. When he's talking about ripping off regulations and everything else, well, that's pretty straightforward. He did say he was going to put in a massive tax cut. He did say he was going to put in a Muslim ban. Yes, he did say these things. These things are ghastly. He did say those things. The economics is the part that he's going to pretty much toss overboard. Because the economic programs that he was talking about directly and adversely affect the people who are giving him money to be in that office. So, yeah. That's why people, I would imagine, vote Republican. It has nothing to do with economics. It has nothing to do with their welfare. And if you're trying to make an argument to those people on why they should vote for you and not their party, you have to understand that there's a cultural aspect to this particular vote that goes beyond this conversation of argument. You got to understand that. Otherwise, your argument is going to fall on deaf ears. You have to be aware of the situation to which you find yourself and to the arguments that's specific to them, that's based on self-interest, to bring them over to your side. You can make that case. I'd argue you can't make that case through those parties, at least not the way they're organized currently. Those parties are organized to create dissent and to create distance and a fracture in the society. That fracture allows for 1% to govern the 99% and allows that 1% to accrue massive amounts of wealth in the process. The issue is class, not race. The issue is class. Race is a red herring. Class is the thing that you're looking for, because ultimately, all the things that those voters, those Trump voters, are complaining about are issues of class, not race. I know Donald Trump is pointing to the other and trying to say that that other is somehow the problem. No. No. Stop hitting down. Stop punching down. Certainly, the immigrant has no power whatsoever to enshrine anything that's going to give them an advantage. None of these other demographics do either. Your issue, your culprit, the person who you need to look out for, is how your system is arranged. Socioeconomics, the political apparatus, how that political apparatus is subservient to the capitalistic impulse, or at the very least, to the socioeconomic apparatus of this particular country. You got to see how it works. I mean, otherwise, you're always going to be fighting these shadows, and you're never necessarily going to get to the root cause of the issue. And these parties will continue to be essentially blocks to prevent you from changing the tangible reality to which we exist under. So, alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to write, feel free to share, and you can always support the work through Patreon. Thanks.